listening to this and you're a fan of Bea Arthur, you're going to be even more of a fan after you read Carl's book. Talk to me about Bea Arthur. Um, she was an extraordinary supporter of the center in ways that you didn't even realize until after she'd passed.
Well, I knew she was extraordinary in her support while she was still alive, but she upped the ante from beyond the grave. Um,
I love the
so,
story of you pulling off the road and sort of, just you're overwhelmed and you're praying and you're thinking about B as one of the people. Anyway, talk a little about that. It's a magical moment in the book.
let me step back a little bit from that.
Sure.
So, in 2005, we'd been open for 3 years. I started the Forney Center in 2002. And by 2005, we only had 12 beds and, like hundreds of kids wanting to get into those beds. And a man named Ray Clausen came to volunteer for us, saw how, poor we were, how grassroots, how much need there was. He was like a high profile set designer for like Broadway shows and like award ceremonies. Like he designed sets for Elvis, for Judy Garland, for Madonna. Um, and he had done the set designing for Bea Arthur's one woman show on Broadway back
Right.
in 2002, 2003. So he reached out to all the celebrities that he knew, saying, would somebody come and please put on a benefit for these poor kids, who are out in the street with nowhere to go? And the only person that responded was B. And B flew to New York, in the middle of the winter. She hated winter so much she didn't even have a coat. She had to borrow Angela Lansbury's coat.
That's great. A great detail.
Yeah, they're very close friends. And put on this amazing performance for us. We raised like $45,000, which at that time was like by far the most we'd ever raised from any kind of benefit. But then afterwards, she started going to the media and saying, it's unacceptable that parents are throwing their children out for being LGBT. That's inhumane. And I would do anything for these kids. And the Ali Forney Center is saving lives. And so, to have a star of B's magnitude, like especially within the LGBT community,
Right.
like, talk about us that way, it really kind of put us on the map in a way that we hadn't been before. And it really upped our profile and helped people to start to see the importance of the work we were doing.
Yeah.
Um, in New York City, there are like 28,000 nonprofit organizations. It's
Yeah.
hard to have your profile elevate to the point where people hear your name and know what you're doing and know what your work is about and know the importance of it. And
Yeah.
Bee's support was just a really, really important step for us of getting beyond that kind of mass of anonymity. But then, okay, fast forward three
Well,
years.
wait, can we go back and mention that your husband got to be her bodyguard for a bit,
Oh
and
yeah,
which was a
yeah.
dream come true because he's a Golden Girls fan?
So my husband Raymond is like he's built like a defensive lineman in the NFL. Um, and he is the biggest B. Arthur fan you could imagine. And pretty much every night of his life, he watches the Golden Girls reruns. Um,
They hold up.
so yeah, no, he pretty much knows every line by heart. So B does this big performance, and then we have this after party, and there are hundreds of like crazed, obsessed B. Arthur homo fans like thronging at her at this after party, like grabbing at her and all this mess. And I was like, oh my God, I should have, planned security. I hadn't anticipated there would be this huge, crush of people pawing at poor B. Arthur. And she was in her mid 80s and had just put on this huge show. I mean, she was exhausted and so I roped Raymond in and said, would you please be her bodyguard? So Raymond, like, made everybody line up. He was like, you can't touch her. You can talk to her, but you can't touch her. And
Right.
he would only let them be there for 30 seconds. And he was like, move on, next.
He ran a tight
So,
ship.
so yeah, no, Raymond took control of the crowd. And but he didn't know that this was going to happen. So at one
Right.
point he had to go to the bathroom. He had not prepared himself by
Sure.
emptying his bladder. And B grabbed him with this iron grip and was like, "Where the hell do you think you're going?" So, Raymond held it in
He
for
held it
B.
in, he kept it going.
Yeah, yeah,
But then you were gonna spring forward to the next part of the B story.
yeah. So in 2008, it was like the fiscal crisis, like when the stock market crashed, and it was awful for us. Like the city was really late paying us. A lot of our foundations kind of put the brakes on. They didn't want to like give their money out when the stock market had reduced the money so much. They
Right.
were trying to wait till it went back up a little bit before they, gave out their funds. Our private donations were also slowing down, and we were just struggling really badly. Like I didn't have the money to pay the rents. By that time we had like 6 or 7 apartments and,
Right.
a drop-in program, and I just was really struggling to pay the rent. I was really struggling to make the payrolls. I was really struggling to pay the, health insurance for the staff. It was all a mess. And we were getting further and further in the hole. And then one day I was driving to work, and one of my staff called me and said that she'd just gotten a phone call from one of our landlords saying that if we didn't bring the rent immediately up to date, they were going to start eviction proceedings. And I just felt like, I'd been kind of balancing this house of cards, trying to like just pay people as little as possible, as late as possible. And it just felt like, okay, it's all collapsing. Like the whole
Right.
thing's
It
about
was the
to
final
collapse.
straw.
Yeah. And I was so stressed out that I couldn't keep driving. Like I actually pulled my car off to the side of the road and started walking up and down the edge of the highway. And I'm a Catholic boy, so I started praying, and I was like praying to all the saints I could think of. And, but I was also praying to like people that I knew were dead, who I figured were, like I prayed to Ali Forney, and I prayed to my mother, and I prayed to Sylvia Rivera, who'd been nice to our kids at one point. And I prayed to Bea Arthur. She had just died a few months earlier. And, I knew she cared about us. um, so then, finally I calmed down enough to get back in my car, drove into the city, got to my office, checked my voicemail. And there was a message from a guy named Billy Goldenberg, who was a famous film score producer. Like I think he wrote the music for, I forget, maybe Star Wars or something. But he was a very famous film score producer, and he was very close friends with Bea Arthur, and he had accompanied her on the piano during her one-woman show for us, and also when she was on Broadway. But so, I call Billy back, and he's like, "Carl, we want to put on a really top-notch memorial service for B at, one of the big Broadway theaters, and we'd like you to be a co-producer of the event." And I was like, Billy, I run the program for homeless kids. What do I know about producing Broadway memorials for superstars?
Right.
I don't like I'm flattered you're asking me, but I don't know why you're asking me this. And he's like, look, you would be a figurehead producer. We basically we want to be able to have we want to raise some money to put on a production worthy of B, and so we think people will be more likely to give their money if it's tax deductible. So they would give money to the Ali Forney Center to put on this perform, the thing. And then he said, we figured it made sense to ask you because you're at the very top of the list of the beneficiaries of B. Arthur's will.
And this is
I
the
guess,
first you'd heard about the will.
yeah, yeah. It turned out that she left us $300,000. So, that got us through the 2008, 2009. Like, I don't think we would have made it if it hadn't been for B doing that for us.
And at the time you needed it the most. And you
Yeah.
and your prayer was answered.
I know it was crazy. I mean, like, it was like it actually scared me. Like how could it be that I'm like, in this moment of desperation praying to B. Arthur, and then like half an hour later I find out that B. Arthur is giving us $300,000.
Yeah.
It was like truth is stranger than fiction. Like, if somebody wrote this in a novel, nobody would believe it.